Labour became New Labour, became non-Labour, and is now anti-Labour. It's the exact opposite of what a Labour Party is supposed to be. It acts in the interests of the people that the Labour Party was formed to oppose. And it crushes underfoot the aspirations of those that the Labour Party was formed to represent. In that sense, I say, we are the ghost of Labour's past. We stand for the things they used to stand for. We try to represent the people they've abandoned. And that's why millions of people have an interest in what we have to say. Because a Labour Party which boasts, as I think Ellen said, or it may have been Joe, or it may have been Rob, it may have been Mo, it could have been any of them, which boasts about slaying the sacred cows that Labour was formed to cherish. That boasts, for example, that the income tax on the richest people in the country is lower today in the 11th year of a Labour government than it was under Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson. Older people here will know just how powerful a point that is. Thatcher and Lawson were the most hawkish, aggressive, unashamed advocates of rich people's power of any government of the 20th century. But they taxed the richest people in Britain more than Labour does. How does that figure? How can you have a Labour government that taxes rich people less than Margaret Thatcher and boasts about it? These companies that are turning in these record profits, some of them mind-boggling profits, the oil companies in particular, but even the banks, despite their travails to which I shall come in a minute, even shops, Tesco, Safeway, Morrison's as it now is. I mean, all they do is build a large shed and people give them things that they made and they sell them. It's not rocket science. But you get billions of pounds of profits for doing so. Tesco alone, £2.5 billion profits, on which they're paying less tax than Margaret Thatcher and Nigel Lawson charged. Now, Ellen, I think, made the point. Our students can't go to university because the country can't afford to give them a free education, even though virtually every one of the government got a free education, by the way. Nice work if you can get it. That ladder trick, climb up it, kick it away, no one else can get up. They say we can't afford free education, but the reason we can't afford free education is that rich people and rich companies are paying less tax than they did when Britain was a poorer country than it is now. This is another very important point to grasp. In the 1970s, when we had free universities and gave people a grant to go, Britain was much poorer than it is now. Now we're the 4th richest country in the world, but we have the poorest pensioners in Western Europe. How does that figure? What's Labour about that? How can you say you're Labour when your pensioners are shivering to death in the winter time in greater numbers than the pensioners of any country in Europe, including Siberia? I'm not making that up. More pensioners die of the cold in winter in Britain than they do in Siberia, in the 4th richest economy in the world. And as again you said, in this rich country of ours, they're putting the retirement age up. They're describing the fact that the pensioners of the country are living longer as a problem. What kind of mentality is that? It's a problem. Our people are living longer. And so their answer is not to tax the rich and the rich companies, not to cut back on the expenditure on war and weapons, to which again I'll come, but to make people work 5 years more before they can become pensioners. The whole point of social democracy was that the workers were supposed to work less with each generation and enjoy more of the fruits of their labour. Not work more and enjoy less of the fruits of their labour. We are the first generation, Jerry and me, of the last 100 years, 150 years actually, that can say our children are likely to have a worse life than we did, are likely to struggle more to get educated, to get housed, to bring up their children than we did. Again, you would have thought it was axiomatic that each generation would get better off than the others as humans developed their capacity to generate wealth. And of course we do generate wealth. The problem is its maldistribution. I represent a constituency on the edge of the City of London, the richest square mile on the earth. It's the richest mile in the whole world. And yet in my constituency, which could throw a stone and hit the city, and maybe they better watch out, the poorest people in England are living in the most overcrowded houses, on the lowest wages, with amongst the poorest health statistics in the whole country. A stone's throw from the richest square mile on the earth. If you live in my constituency, you will live on average 10 years less than you'll live if you're born and raised in Kensington and Chelsea. That Chelsea Road that Jerry was talking about. One city. Not 3 miles, Kevin, 3 or 4 miles apart. And you live 10 years more if you're born and brought up in Kensington and Chelsea than you do in Tower Hamlets and Newham. What's Labour about presiding over that? What's Labour about presiding over the fact that the gap between rich and poor in Britain today is wider than it was when Charles Dickens wrote Oliver Twist? I don't know the Bristol scene, but I'll tell you what it's like in some other parts of the country. There's a man called Lord Harris, who's a carpet manufacturer. He might be a good carpet manufacturer. He might be the best carpet manufacturer the world has ever seen. But how does that qualify you to run a school? Or 2 schools? Or 3 or 4 or 5 he's now got. 5 Lord Harris academies. There's a guy called Reg Vardy. You've probably seen his logo on the Sunderland strip. Not for much longer unless they start winning. Reg Vardy might be a great second-hand car salesman. I might even buy a second-hand car from him. But how does that qualify him to run children's schools? We thought when we started Labour, working people did, that actually schools could be owned by the community, could be run according to the community's wishes, could be controlled by councillors that we could elect and unelect if we didn't like them. And that's what we had for an all too brief period. Now, our schools increasingly will be owned and run by people we can't touch, can't criticise, can't remove, and who are filling our children with their idea of what education is. How long before McDonald's has an academy? long before Walt Disney has an academy. In fact, we've got zones now inside our schools, sponsored by Burger King and McDonald's. In fact, how surreal is this? Much of the school sports programme in England is funded by Cadbury's. So you go for a run, and then you stuff your face with a bar of chocolate, which you have to buy just to get you into the habit. This is the direction of travel that we're now on. But the one I wanted to concentrate on, I told you 30 minutes wasn't enough.